But have you ever known anyone that's owned a slave?
No, but I know a few presidents who did.
You know them personally? So you know anyone that was ever a slave?
Well, no, because
Marriage is the bedrock institution, and strong families create strong communities, which create strong civilizations. And this is why immigrant communities that have come to America, and first-generation immigrants, they're able to move so quickly up the socioeconomic ladder because they might not have wealth, they might not have big bank accounts, they might not own a lot of land, but they have the thing they know that will keep them together, which is a family that will not be broken up at any means necessary. I'll finally say this. Let me just say this.
That's true. Not if what he said was true. I don't know if everything he said was true.
do you think that slavery and ensuing Jim Crow laws had a lasting impact on the black community in the United States?
Some, and that's a good question. So if you correlate all the impact of Jim Crow and slavery, I would say that you could generously say 26% single motherhood in the black community in the 1960s. So about 26% of all black babies born in the 1950s and 1960s were born to a single mother. Now it's 77%. Wow. So I would ask you, why did it jump 50 points, 50%, since the Civil Rights Act as America got significantly less racist?
So that's fine. I don't know why it jumped. Who cares? But
Well, it wasn't slavery or Jim.
Who cares? I care. I care because this affects the black community. I would hope you care if you're up here debating it. Maybe he's saying who cares that it jumped. I don't really know, but I would hope that you do care.
Jim Crow, it
No.
was something else.
So the only lasting impact that slavery had on the U.S. was that less black families had fathers.
No, not necessarily, but have you ever known anyone that's owned a slave?
No, but I know a few presidents who did.
You know them personally? So you know anyone that was ever a slave?
Well, no, because So okay, I don't know anyone who was a slave. So it had no impact?
No, it had some impact. The question is, did it have an impact that is measurable and significant enough now in 2021, where we saw a key metric that influenced the livelihood of the black community, like single motherhood rate, that as America got less racist, all of a sudden now 77% of black babies are born without a father, where before it was 26%.
I would say the biggest impact that it's had doesn't even have to do with, you know, our like day-to-day lives, but I would say it kind of stopped us from owning a lot of land, because a lot of land was owned years and years and years ago. But when you come to our day-to-day lives today, and single motherhood jumped up 50 points, there are still things we could do to be successful in today's time. It is 100% the truth, but we have like cultural issues that we have to work on. But let's continue.
I suppose the question is this, because this is the question about systemic racism, right? What law that is in practice today actively discriminates against black people?
So here's what I would say to that. The idea of capitalism and America, like you said, is it doesn't matter who you are, show me what you got, is fresh start. So what would happen if you had like 150 years in a country for your family to...
And people say this analogy a lot, and I kind of touched on this earlier where I said it stopped us from owning land, but the only problem with that analogy is that is this one thing. Most people do not own land. So if you're trying to say that this gives white people this upper edge, this superhuman, you know, advantage, most white people don't own land. I mean, you can look at their house, but I'm talking about owning land. It's usually owned by a small group of families. And this is what people kind of don't realize. Like, a lot of Americans in general don't have that much assets. They have a normal amount. If you're lucky, you're in the six figures. But so if you look at it from that perspective, we aren't disadvantaged because you're trying to say, oh, we had a 150-year advantage. Most Americans live normal lives anyways. So, you know, y'all get what I'm saying?
Build wealth, to own a house, to have a job, to get college education for your kids, to build generational wealth. And then you took another family who didn't have the opportunity to do any of that for 150 years, and then set them off on the same even starting point. Is that really an even starting point, and would that not result in some kind of systemic disadvantage for those people?
The black middle class was the fastest growing demographic in the 1940s and 1950s until the Great Society Act and that intervention. It's very tempting to do what you're doing. And I'm not faulting you for it, because you've probably been propagandized to believe it. And that's okay, because I think you're actually a victim in this case, because you've been misled to want to believe that things you never lived under, never understood, and that I think you are partially seeing.
And you're actually pretty arrogant to think that you that have an advantage over me. It's just, and I get what y'all do when y'all say stuff like this. And I think it's kind of insulting, if I'm being honest, because you're like, well, they had a 150-year advantage. How could they ever get to my level? First of all, we all have the same ability to get to any level in America. And if you're using that analogy, what do you think of the immigrants who come to America every single year who have to build up success? They have no family rooted history here. You know how privileged you have to be to really have family history of wealth? And people I don't know why people think this, that white people just have this crazy generational wealth. You're white and you don't have generational wealth. Well, I don't know. But most people do not have that. It's just unrealistic in day-to-day society. Doesn't mean that they have, like, you have an advantage. Like, we just don't have it.
Had a disproportionate impact in the world that you're living in today. So, for example, if that were to be true, then first-generation immigrants would not be able to quickly make good choices and move up the ladder in this country, which I think we have some first-generation immigrants here tonight. Now, let me say this, that this idea that America is systemically racist to the core would also be quickly debunked by the fact that more blacks have legally immigrated to America since the 1980s than ever were here brought as slaves. Over 2 million blacks from the Caribbean and from Nigeria and from Western Africa have come here to America. So the question is, why is it that in every statistic that you could probably rattle off, are black people doing worse than white people? What is it?
That's facts, bro. I never even thought about that. I never even thought about that, bro. Because why did you just assume, and that was actually kind of racist, why did you just assume that all black people in America just came from slaves? Like, you don't even know if that's true. You don't know if I came from a slave. And I'm just messing around, y'all. But it was a little bit racist, because not all black people do come from slaves, and you're saying they have a 150-year advantage. Not every black person here, ancestors were brought over that way. But anyways, let's continue.
Well, I would point to the fact that fathers are not in the home, because it was 26% of black females in the 1960s were single mothers. Now it's 77%. If you look at the Brookings Institution, a liberal think tank, there are 3 things you need to do to stay out of poverty in America. Number 1, graduate high school. Well, because of public sector unions and the dominance of our government schools, that's harder than ever in far too many communities. Not just black communities, not just Hispanic communities. The second thing, get a job, any job. And the third thing is to obviously not to commit crimes, but to try to get married before you have children. And so some of what I believe has contributed to the downfall of some of these communities has nothing to do with white people with the neck on black people. Instead, it's the following. Fathers no longer being in the home, the rise of sexual anarchy that came in post-1960s liberalism that removed this idea of sex being confined to a marital relationship to be gratuitous and everywhere. All of a sudden you've seen an increase in not just the birth rate, but the single motherhood rate and abortion alongside of it. I would just ask this question, I'm just curious. How much do you think outputs are based on people's decisions, based on the advantages they're born into?
I mean, as someone who's taken Introduction to Sociology, your life is greatly influenced by what the conditions you're born into. But I promise this will be the last thing. Just, you say there's less fathers in the home, of, you know, many black families,
Yes.
and that's the issue. So what do you think is keeping fathers out of the home in those?
And this is my problem with a lot of these young, I don't even know what to call them, liberals. They think that they're advocates, and I say this so much, this might be my catchphrase. You think you're an advocate, but you're really hurting us. Like, you're really the ones who are holding people back, because you're just assuming that fathers not being in the home is because of the system. The system is ripping people out of the home. The system is throwing them into prison. The system is not making you sell drugs. The system is not making you impregnate multiple women. The system is not making you shoot people. The system is not making you do crime. And just because we are black does not mean we are more prone to this brainwashing of a system that wants us to... Bruh, that's not the case. And I'm not going to sit here in front like a system isn't, you know, pushing something. I don't know if it's happening. I don't know. I'm young and in college. I don't know. I'm not a sociology professor. I'm not Charlie Kirk. I don't research this all day, and I'm not afraid to say it. But what I will say is, you make all these excuses for why black men aren't raising their kids. Why the marital rate in the black community is so low. You make all these excuses, and I'm tired of hearing it. Because we can fix this issue. We are men. We are women. We are people. We can fix our issues. I know you don't think we're people. I know you don't think we can control our own actions. But I promise you, we are smart enough to control our own actions. So stop trying to say that we are not. It's extremely insulting. It's extremely insulting, and I swear I'm tired of hearing it.
It's a great question.
Do you think it could be over-policing and police arresting, like, disproportionately?
We went through this, everybody.
Do you think it could be law enforcement disproportionately enforcing laws in black neighborhoods and arresting more black males than any other demographic?
So blacks are actually under-arrested and under-policed per the percentage of crimes they commit. We talked about some of those numbers. But let me tell you one thing in particular. In the Great Society Act, we decided as a civilization to subsidize single motherhood. In the 1960s, we told black women you no longer need to be married to have children, you can get married to the government. And we saw a dramatic escalation and increase of the deterioration of the nuclear family and a replacement of that of the nanny state and the welfare state. And I would say this, that every single activist group that steps up, that talks about systemic racism and oppression, if you look at the data, purely the data, if there is a movement to put black fathers back in the home and to try and challenge the sexual anarchy that came in the post-1960s and had a more prudent and pious view of sexual relations in America, which is a very unpopular view, by the way, for most Americans, but it's true that before the 1960s, sexual relations were, at least culturally, supposed to always be confined to marital relationships. The more gratuitous that we have been in trying to catalog it in media and in pop culture and in Hollywood and yes, in schools, then all of a sudden you have seen people say, well, why do I need to get married for that? Marriage is the bedrock institution, and strong families create strong communities, which create strong civilizations. And this is why immigrant communities that have come to America, and first-generation immigrants, they're able to move so quickly up the socioeconomic ladder because they might not have wealth, they might not have big bank accounts, they might not own a lot of land, but they have the thing they know that will keep them together, which is a family that will not be broken up at any means necessary. I'll finally say this. Let me just say this.
That's true.
No, I want to thank you for coming because it took courage to ask that question. I'm just going to ask you to do one thing. Please forget everything you learned in Introduction to Sociology 101 because it was likely all garbage. So thank you so much.
A lot of what he said was true. I don't know if everything he said was true because this is not my area of study. But I'm just looking at my life, what I've seen happen, what I know to be true, what I've experienced, and it's facts. If you have any suggestions, comment down below. And I'll see you next time.